Good afternoon, guys. What is going on? Welcome back to the channel. So behind me here I have my 92 Acura Integra. So something that I've been wanting to do this car for a long time, since I've done my K-swap years ago, is a power steering setup. And when I did the K-swap, I had already a depowered rack and everything. When I did my right-hand drive conversion, I then depowered my rack again, just to make it, so it was plug and play as it was before. Now the issue I've run into is nowadays I have, sticky tires. I'm running some Koenig wheels on some Yokohama AO52 tires, and the 200 tread wears, no power steering. I'm just getting lazy. I'm getting tired, and especially trying to park this thing if I ever go to, a store or a car meet or something. So something I've done is went and purchased a power steering kit, which is not going to be a hydraulic unit. This is going to be a full electric power steering conversion setup. And this video is going to be me trying to step-by-step walk you through how to install this if you have a DA or if you have any sort of older Honda. This is a universal application as it's a universal kit, but the same concept is going to pretty much apply across whatever you're trying to put it in. And the reason I'm making the video is there's not a whole lot of videos on this. So let me just jump right into what we're doing. So coming over to my work table here, I've got everything laid out that you get in your kit. So this kit comes from ePowerSteering.com. This kit is their kit number 4, which is their straight kit. Now right here in the instructions, this will tell you this is a steering column setup mounted electric assist motor from a 2002 to 07 Saturn Vue or an 05-06 Chevy Equinox. Now there is other kits that use Japanese units, which I thought I was getting, but turns out not. So the Japanese units basically don't have this big guy in here from what I understand, but also they have a built-in fail-safe. So if this, for some reason, a wire breaks, fails, or if you blow your fuse or somehow overheat your motor, you will still get partial assist. But in this case, you'll just go back to no power steering if something like that happens. Now, what you get in the box, this is your brain for your unit. Normally, if you junkyard this yourself, I decided to buy this whole kit because this unit is remanufactured with a warranty. This is going to be attached to this, and these wires here lead to a block-off plate that is on the back side right here. So normally this box attaches, I believe, right here. So they've already done that, so this is a little bit more compact. So essentially, you're going to be remote mounting your ECU for the motor somewhere, and then just, it's extending the wires to where you can reach it. This is your wiring diagram, basically your wiring instructions. This is what you get in the kit. So this is your adjustable sensitivity dial. It uses like a 100K potentiometer, I believe. You get a huge fuse in here, I believe a 60 amp, and then your harness for this to, plug and play. And then you have, this is a universal, output shaft adapter if you need it. And this is what goes on the front here. So you'll see there's a flange here that has the 3 bolts. That's what this is for. And this tube essentially is to be welded to your factory steering column, because again, this is a column mounted unit. So basically what we have to do is try and find a spot to fit this under the dash. Now in my case particularly, being that this is a 92 Integra, I have a cable to hydro conversion. I have no room under the dash, so for me it's going to be a very, very tight fit. So depending on your car and your setup under the dash, it might be easier. I don't have air vents or nothing like that, just harness, a pedal assembly, and a short steering column. I don't know why they send you this rubber boot, because this goes over this, but then this tube doesn't fit over that. So, I mean, take that with a grain of salt. And then these are some 3/4 inch inner diameter to 36 teeth splines, I believe. So these are what you use to, attach to here. So I think in this case, primarily, they're anticipating you to unthread this and then sit it on there like that to an extent. And then you would weld your factory steering shaft into this, and then I think they have this nut in here as like a secondary, just as like a fail-safe, so you can try and get it on there. I don't know that that's necessary, because I'm probably just going to weld this directly on there, but I'm learning as I'm making this video as well as teaching. So let's get into it. First things first, I need to get some access down here. I'm going to take my driver's seat out so I have some room, and then I'm going to not take the dash out, but take the column plastics off, and then we're going to unbolt the steering column. So I will pull that out of the car, because each car is going to be different. On these DAs, you have a 10mm bolt connecting it to the steering rack at the bottom, and then you got 2 12mm nuts going up at the bottom area, and then you got 2 12mm nuts more in the middle of the column, and then just your harness. So it's pretty simple. I don't need to show you that. So let's get to the important stuff once the column is out, where we use that. I got the steering column out, and I just went inside without the column, and I was trying to mock up where this motor is going to sit. In this case, I don't know if I can do this one-handed because this is very heavy with the back casing of the motor on, but let me attempt. My situation is going to be different than yours with the amount of space, but I am going to lose my adjustable steering column. Mine has a tilt column, and I'm probably going to lose my telescoping, but I'm not concerned about that, only because I am caged and strapped in with a 5-point harness, and I rarely drive the car, so and the amount of force it would take to get the steering wheel to, you know, have to crush, that's not a concern that I have. So for somebody that's trying to use this as maybe a daily driver, you may have a little bit more of an issue. You may have to try and figure out something else in terms of mounting it. But for me, I don't care about losing the tilt because I can just modify it to sit at the angle that I want anyway, since I don't ever use the tilt. But in this case, not going to be able to hold this one-handed, I don't think, but kind of the motor's going to sit up there with the motor, well, the bulk of it sitting off to the right. Something kind of like that. That's so heavy, but you kind of get the idea. So in that case, I have to try and grind all of these tack welds off that hold this assembly together. I'm going to undo the hub, take this off. It's just a couple screws. You can see the back side of it right there and one on the bottom. And then the steering switch stuff, you know, whatever, that comes off. But yeah, as for the tilt stuff, my motor is going to be sitting pretty much right in this area. So this whole center section of this stuff is going to have to come off, which means I'm also going to have to adapt new mounting points more than likely. So first things first, let's get this thing stripped. So doing to this point now, it's probably not going to be the most practical solution for a daily driver that has, you know, AC or even, you know, all the vents and everything under there. It's definitely going to be a tight fit, but if you don't mind losing a couple parts of those bits of your column, then you should be fine proceeding forward. So let's get this going. So I've gone and roughly test fit this into the car, marked where I think I need to cut. So you can kind of see that line right there. So you can see that's this whole section here is going to be where the motor is sitting. So it looks like I may be able to keep my telescoping. If not, again, not a big issue. But I tried disassembling this. I cannot figure out how to actually take it apart. I took the snap ring out, so all that's, you know, out of the way, but it doesn't seem to want to disassemble. So because I do have a spare, I'm not too concerned with ruining this. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut it right here and start from there. So yeah, moving on. So in this case, like I said, this tube end slides over like that. So then we can weld all the way around that just fine. And then this will slip over this as we need it to. And then on this rear end here is essentially where we will attach one of these guys. Well, I'm sorry, like this. And then we will, you know, tighten it down however we need to or whatever. And then from there, we will weld on the rear end section just like that. And then that's that. I mean, I'll have to make new steering column mounts, but that should be relatively easy, especially if I got two up here to work with. And I was thinking about trying to reuse this guy in some fashion in the next. I don't care if I have to, like, you know, hard mount it or something, but it'll at least make it pretty easy. So what I've done now is I've come in here and I've bolted up the lower half, and I roughly held this up one-handedly, not very easy, and I tried my best to make a Sharpie mark where I believe this joint's going to end up, and then I've gone and marked it up a little bit extra so I have room to work with. And I'm going to start there. I'm not going to worry about this top half because this looks okay. It's coming out a little farther, so I can always shorten this up. That's not a huge deal. I'm just more concerned about getting the motor itself mounted right now because that's the hardest part. So now what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've tack welded the piece that I just cut off because I needed to move this back. Now that I was able to test fit it properly in the car, I was about 1 3/8 inches too long still, so this is my new cut line. And the reason I tacked the other end back on is so I could have something to clamp to, because for something like this, I'm just trying to get as straight of a cut as I can, because I realized I can't taper this because it is a tube in here and not solid stock like that. So I need to have a very good butt weld, and I'm still going to bevel and hot pass it just to make sure it's strong, but this is just going to make this easy for me to now line up and clamp just like that. So now, test fit, this is the correct length. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tack this all up and test fit again. All right, so now with this piece all tacked up, make sure that this again fits. So slip it into its designated points. And if we're looking good, then I'm going to start working out a mounting point for it, and then we'll move on from there. So progress update says this thing is partly mounted. So mind you, that's obviously just the weight of the motor because the tube rotates. So roughly it'll sit tucked up there. Now, this is very, very hard to do one-handed again. But yeah, ideally I want it to sit something like that. So right now I'm going to take the factory front mount section for the steering column and try and see if I can adapt that in some fashion. And then as for the steering column itself, it's going to have to be shortened greatly. I got the steering wheel and stuff on it so I could kind of mock it up, and it's super duper long, which again is to be expected. So yeah, we're looking pretty good though, and I've got plenty of room up there, more so than I thought, thankfully. So yeah, next up, try and adapt a front mounting solution. So reusing the factory bracket wasn't going to work. It put the steering column really crooked. So now what I'm doing is I'm just making new brackets. Right now it's not exactly where it's going to sit. I'm going to have to try and use my foot down there at the joint to angle it over there, and then I'm going to have to tack this bracket over here and then make another one. So right now it's kind of all clamped together, but yeah, I can move it a little bit down there. But this is definitely really tricky by yourself. So yeah, let's do that really quick. I have got to the point where I just rested the seat in there, so steering column, I am just resting in here like this. So this was me getting a feel for it and also kind of getting a general measurement, because now I just finished welding those top brackets, so I do have to reinforce the rear end of that, so I'll have to do that after this part. But in the meantime, I'm just going to work on getting the top section attached, that way it's actually all connected. So what I've done here is, can't really see it too well, there's a Sharpie mark somewhere along right there. And on that Sharpie mark is where I'm going to cut, so that way I have access to weld the tube around. And then I think I'm going to have to cut a window out to be able to weld the U-joint on to the adapter piece. But we'll worry about that here in a second. I'm going to go ahead and pull this tube out again, and we'll cut it down to size. So because of how short this steering column is, I'm having a hard time getting this where I want it. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure inside this tube to where it reaches the threads, which is roughly the midway point, I believe, but I'm just going to measure it anyway with a micrometer. Because ideally I want it to sit just like that. It's going to fall in there if I let it go. And then from there I'm going to measure that distance back here, because for me to get the best fitment possible, I have to trim this to that, to where it'll go all the way back. So I want that shaft in there. That's obviously be the midpoint here, and that will roughly, this thing's still going to be slightly on the long side for how I'm used to, and then I'm not going to be able to reuse my plastics, I don't think, so that's kind of an issue. And then the other thing is my key won't lock anymore, since I've obviously lost my the little divot where the key goes in. But by the end of it, we should be lengthwise sitting somewhere around there, which is pretty much factory, so pretty darn close. Got the lengths all figured out now. I'm pretty much ready to go ahead and finish welding everything. I'm pretty happy with the location of it. I just wish the steering wheel was perfectly straight, instead it's just slightly off to the right. But because of the lack of space I have, I'm kind of doing the best I can. I can always just, you know, either get used to it, because to me, every BMW I've driven, you always sit kind of to the left of the wheel. This kind of feels like the same thing. So yeah, this is going to have a little bit of an order of operation. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this up really quick, and then I'm going to have to weld this on first all the way up. And then I'm going to have to slip this tube over so that way I can do the weld joint, and then weld this tube back together with this. And then I'm going to go through and then attach it to the steering column. So the motor, I'm going to chop on the tube that's on the column right now that I made, I'm going to chop halfway down and a couple inches up. Try and do it cleanly. That way I can, you know, weld this joint here to the rest of the motor that's in the front there, and then I'll go ahead and weld that back together. If that makes sense. It'll make more sense when I actually do it, so you can visualize it. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take this all up, clean it, make sure it's nice and clean, and yeah, I'll get back to you guys. Steering column is fully welded up. You know, I do apologize for the light. Like, it's not even that dark in here, but the way the table is right here, the camera just doesn't pick up the light. But yeah, so this is all fully welded. I have the piece there, so I actually ended up taking 2 chunks out because I didn't have it long enough. So I just welded that back together, letting that cool off. So I have to bolt this back in the car and align it, because this section here is part of the tube that's getting welded to this tube, obviously. So this is where my turn signals and stuff bolt to. So I need this to be orientated in the right direction before I can weld it. So I'm going to go ahead, bolt this in the car, tack the tubes together, and then I'll pull it back out and then weld it. And then all that's left to do is weld the little joint that I tacked up before. And then this is all physically bolted in the car. I'm probably going to make some rear brackets, but I'm not going to show you that. After this is all welded, we'll just jump to the wiring, because it's going to be different for everybody. So yeah, take that with a grain of salt. Let's get this in, let's tack it up. So here's the finished product, at least all welded together. New steering column. So you can see I got the weld joint there. I used the nut as a secondary protection. Welded there, boxed this all back in, welded there, and got this all bolted back together. So this thing's ready to be bolted back up into the car, and then we can start the wiring. So I also forgot to mention, you need to mount your ECU for the power steering. So I just made a little bracket just like that, trying to get the light up in there, but you can see that right there. So basically all I did was I just bent a piece of metal. I just traced it on some construction paper to the shape of the backside of this, and then I bent it, to follow it, because it says to mount it to something metal to act as a heat sink. So I don't really know much about heat sinks, so I just made it out of 1/8" plate, and I drilled like 6 holes in the back of it, and then I just mounted it up right here. So you can see that right there. So now this thing is fully mounted. I did just make a secondary bracket here a little bit ago for the motor, and this thing's much more sturdy now. So you're going to get the same instructions in your kit, but we're going to just go over this to make it simple for both of us. So right here it says, we highly recommend that you mount the steering ECU where it can be protected from the weather, but do not totally enclose it in a box. Mount it directly to bare metal to act as a heat sink, and install the EPS controller in a convenient place where you can reach it while driving. If you want, you can cut the adjustment knob shorter to the desired length. And they tell you that because you can see just how long the dial is. So I will be trimming mine down a little bit, and I already have a mounting position where my AFR gauge is in my right side vent, so I'm going to use that. Now, so it starts with plug labeled A with a brown and white wire, gets connected to the steering ECU receptacle labeled B. So this is plug A on your EPS controller right here. So this guy is going to plug directly into slot B on the controller here. So that's pretty obvious. That's going to plug in just like that. Now you'll notice that this is on the EPS controller right here. It says the red wire going out of the EPS controller gets connected to an ignition switch 12-volt power supply. So for me, because I have gauges, I can just tee it into one of those. And then the black wire going out of the EPS controller is going to get connected to a ground. Closest chassis ground is recommended. So obviously that just means bare metal. So this guy and this guy. Next up, it says the receptacle labeled C on the steering ECU is where you connect the included black power plug. That would be this guy. And C would be right next to where we just plugged in the last guy right here. And again, it's on the diagram. The red wire should be connected to the positive side of the 12 volt, and that's where this guy comes in. So wherever you're putting it, one end of this wire is going to run to the battery, the other end is going to run into this plug essentially. And they send you two big crimp pin things, and then they send you the back side of the thing, of the connector, and they send you a fuse. So you're going to want to hook that up to your battery with the fuse in line. And then on the diagram right here, you can see which way it goes. So just like that, red is going to be on top. And once your power is hooked up, then you still have the black wire on the plug, which is going to be this lower portion. Just send that to a ground, and they do recommend you use 10 gauge or larger. Then on the back side of the sheet here, it'll tell you receptacle labeled D on the steering ECU is where the blue plug labeled G from the motor is. So that's the blue plug that's on your motor. That's going to hook in to this last port right here. And then all that's left, you'll notice that there's 4 wires hanging off the back of this guy, and there's 4 of matching wires to it on the steering motor itself. So they call that series F, and you're just going to attach their corresponding color to the wires that are on the steering motor. And yes, you can extend these as you need. And you can solder, butt connect, whatever you like to use, and you just hook all that together. On to the final part of the wiring for this job. So this is where we're doing the power plug for the main, part of the ECU, I believe. For me, in this case, they recommend a minimum of 10 gauge wire or larger. So in my case, because my battery is in my hatch, which is back here, it's got quite the distance to travel. So I'm opting for 8 gauge because it has to come from up there, travel all the way back to there. So I got 15 foot of 8 gauge, so that way I can match the ground to it. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and run this really quick and show you what that looks like, and then we should be ready to turn this thing on and see if it works. So you can see my red wire coming from right there. It's tucked up because my motor is behind the plastic. Ran along here, inside the frame here, coming out here. So I do have a rear kill switch that goes to this guy where my keyhole is. So this guy right here, I'm going to go ahead and just terminate the wire here because this is just battery straight to here. And to my understanding, this has to go, more ideally back here by the battery. So I'm going to go ahead, trim this out somewhere right here, and we'll crimp this in. So the way to do this, there's normally a tool for these kinds of connections. Granted, right here is just going to be more of a butt connection, solder joint type connection. But this guy right here, I don't have the right tool for this thing. So on the plug where it went inside the car, I just crushed it as good as I could and then melted heat shrink around it to make sure it stayed solid, and it seemed to be okay. So yeah, let's roll with that. So I chose a thicker ring terminal like this for the battery hookup. So it's made for larger wire, but all I did was cut the wire back a little extra long, folded it over itself like that, and now I'm going to just crush it in the vise. So now I'm working on the ground wire. Same process. I don't have any black wire, so I'm just going to use a Sharpie to write on here ground for myself. Well, here's the ground wire, so we should be able to plug this thing in, plug in the 60 amp fuse, and turn this thing on. Alright, this is the moment of truth. Clean up the carpet slightly right there. Okay, so yeah, my ignition switch is kind of funkily turned down here. That's just temporary for now. I just gotta get different bolts so I can, you know, easily access them. But alright. So when I plugged in my relay, that's my power up here, since it's connected to the battery that, you know, hooks up power. So I already heard the one click. So just heard it click because I turned the knob up. Okay, we're actually pretty sure I think we're working. Heck yeah. Well, let's fire this up and spin around the parking lot really quick, make sure it's actually good. Alright, so right now I've got it on the low sensitivity, and it definitely already feels like it's working, so let's get it out onto the asphalt. Oh no, it's definitely working. Oh wow. That's effortless. Like, what the heck? That is so stinking cool. Like one-handed running Yokohama AO52s, and I can turn it so easy. So I was hoping it would lessen the steering ratio a little bit with the electric assist, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And my alignment's way off right now, so don't mind the steering wheel being all crooked right now, but it definitely works. Okay, we have electric power steering. Well, there you guys have it. The DA officially has full electric power steering assist. No hydraulic, no hoses, no fluids, no nothing. It's just straight electric. So, I don't think that this is really applicable on you know, completely stock cars because of the limitations on room. But you never know if you don't try. So, but yeah, the car feels good. It definitely needs an alignment because I already need an alignment. So now it's just reiterating it now that the electric assist is partially countering me on some of the, you know, rougher parts of the road. Yeah, otherwise it feels really good. The sensitivity works. The only thing is I wired mine straight to my kill switch, which is as soon as I put my key in, it's hot. So the only thing different is I'll probably change that later just so it doesn't kill my battery if I forget my key in there. But only difference would be when I put my key in to my trunk, then my relay clicks. Whereas when you turn your ignition on, then you really would click, depending on how you set it up. And hopefully you guys found the video interesting and of some information. It's hard to do it all as I'm learning and try and give you descriptions on exactly what to do step by step, and I didn't want to have to go back and take it all apart to make a better video for. So hopefully this one works for you guys. If you enjoyed the video, let me know in the comments down below. If you're new to the channel, hopefully you've considered subscribing by now. Thanks for spending some time with me here today. You can get all the wiring stuff that I used, all the tools and stuff, on my Amazon affiliate links, so that way it kicks a few bucks my way if you buy it like that. And yeah, anyways guys, thanks for hanging out with me. Do what you love, forget about the rest, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace out.